Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 31 of All About Nothing. It is cold and dark here in the global north. The days are getting shorter. It's winter here. And I was listening to a program the other day, and I heard that it was the 28th of November, and it was the anniversary of the Coconut Grove fire in Boston in 1942. And I remembered years and years ago when I first came into this field how Bessel used to tell the story that there was a cigarette girl who worked in the Coconut Grove nightclub, and she was doing her work as she always did, and a fire broke out in the club. And what happened that night was that almost 500 people were trapped and burned and died in that fire. And so it's a historic day and a historic catastrophe in Boston history. And I hadn't thought about it in a long, long time. And Bessel used to tell the story because, and this is what I remember, and it's funny how these things lodge in one's mind. This young woman who had suffered through this calamitous event, every year, right around the same time, she would have an episode where she would go running down the street screaming for, dear life, that we're going to die, we're going to die, we're going to die. Run, everybody run, we're all going to die. And it was a psychotic episode. And so every year they would cart her off, put her in the mental hospital, put her on drugs, settle her down, get her, keep her for a week or two until she was back in present time. This happened every year. And this was well before we had, any knowledge of trauma and PTSD. None of that. This is, 1942. So nobody really knew anything then. And here she was in the hospital in Boston. And there was a very wise young intern doctor. He wasn't even completed with his training yet. And he became curious about the fact that every year at the same time, this happened. And so he spent some time with her and began to study, what is this about? And what was happening is that somehow in her nervous system, from whether it be the weather or a feeling in the air or some kind of sensory somatic cue, that the memory of the trauma washed over her. And once again, trauma is not remembered, it's relived. She was back in it, and so she was reliving the traumatic episode, which, of course, she had never recovered from, because nobody knew back then how you recover from a traumatic experience. And to be one of the few who survived when almost 500 others were killed, that in itself is a cause for survivor guilt and another dimension of trauma. And so this young doctor began to work with her and regained the diagnostic category or the symptom category of anniversary reactions. So I thought about this because I was thinking about, certainly here, how this time of year in the culture here in the US, and certainly in the area where I live, there's this hysteria almost about these holidays, these winter holidays. And it's a Christian-dominated country, so of course it's Christmas that dominates the commercial field, and there's a whole lot of pressure to have family, to spend money, to buy gifts, to give gifts, to get gifts, to be extravagant. You know, the whole thing that makes people who don't have feel that much worse. And those of us who have troubled trauma histories and troubled family histories, whether it be ourselves or our clients, the people we're helping, either through actual cognitive narrative memory or through the implicit memory, the memory from the air, the cold, the music that you hear when you're going through the stores, the pressure that you feel when you're driving on the road and there's too much traffic and everybody's trying too hard, too fast to get where they're going, and there's this glut everywhere, it seems, and so much pressure, and people who are alone and lonely and suffering, the cold and the dark to begin with, and then the consumerism and the commotion and the competition and the pressure to have. It's really hard on people. And then when you add to that the trauma, the family trauma that lives in the nervous systems of so many of us and our clients, that come washing up, just like the woman who survived the catastrophic fire in Coconut Grove. So I wanted to remind you, in case you notice that you're feeling out of sorts, and nothing has even really happened yet. Yet. Nothing has ever, nothing has actually really happened. But the air is colder, and there's a chill, and the leaves are on the ground, and the trees are kind of bare, and the stores are filled with hype, at least around here, and people are starting to decorate their homes with lights, which I actually like that part. And in our neighborhood, there are lots of lights, and I always enjoy that. But I remember when I was a little girl and being a Jewish girl and being a Jewish, girl with refugee parents who certainly didn't fit in with the culture in this country. I was so jealous of these beautiful Christmas trees that people had because, of course, we couldn't have one. So there was this jealousy, this feeling left out, in addition to not having money and not having the kind of celebrations that it seemed like we were supposed to have, and then getting my hopes up about a gift. And in our family, there was always disappointment around gifts. Always. That was another whole terrible can of worms in our homes. And I know that we're not unique in that. I actually remember hearing a lovely story from London Breed, who used to be the mayor of San Francisco, where I live. And she grew up very poor. She didn't have hot water. She didn't have electricity for most of the years that she was growing up. And she didn't even, I don't believe, have parents. She grew up with her grandmother. And so Christmas was a lonely time where, in addition to being poor and cold, that she, of course, didn't get any gifts until, and I heard her tell this story, and it made me feel really moved, and it made me really like her so much because I didn't really know anything about her before this. And she said, then we got Toys for Tots. And Toys for Tots was this program where they gave out toys to children who didn't get any presents. And London Breed said, I got a present. And it really struck me because here was this little girl who never got a present until this charitable organization came in and gave gifts, and a lot of them were even used toys that were donated by kids who didn't want them anymore. But it didn't matter. She got a present, and it meant so much to her. And I never even thought twice about Toys for Tots. And I have ever since. And I've also felt really warmly about London Breed ever since. Anyway, so many of us have a story about these holidays. And so many of us notice or don't notice that when the days get shorter and darker and colder, if we live in the global north, or if they get however they get where you live, and whatever the atmosphere and the commercial atmosphere and the social atmosphere, and now we have this whole cyber world, and now we've got, Cyber Monday and Black Friday and all these big days of shopping pressure. For those who don't have, or for those who have trauma, or for those who have terrible memories, either about having or not having family get togethers, about gifts or no gifts, so much feeling, so much activation is coming up for all of us. So if you notice that you are feeling blue, or feeling short tempered, or feeling depressed, or feeling more alone, or more sorry for yourself, or whatever your trauma symptoms are, if you will, seem to be flared up without any real stimulus to point to. Maybe it has to do with the season. Maybe it has to do with the cycle of remembering, because somehow the body registers these dates. Just like I know that my husband and I both have birthdays in the summer, and both of us have different but similarly strong trauma memories around our birthdays, that I begin to start getting apprehensive and angry and lonely and miserable or I used to, in anticipation of my birthday and his. And then we started recognizing, oh, there it is. It's the anniversary reaction. So, what to do for ourselves and our clients around these anniversaries? And there's no simple fix for this. And I certainly don't want to be Pollyanna about it, although I have to say that, and this is not only at this time of year, the holiday time, but really, especially when it starts getting cold, and I really, really don't like being cold. Every day I say it because I mean it, because I feel it. I think, oh, I am so glad I live indoors. I am so grateful to live indoors because so many people don't. And so many places are that much colder than here where I live. And their homes have been destroyed or blown away, or are somehow or the other gone from war or climate change or trauma or poverty or whatever it is, and they live nowhere. They're without a home, without any place warm to go inside and cuddle up with someone. Too many people like that. And so I know that it's a good reminder for me to tell myself, wow, I look at these walls and I feel I'm cold. But what about those who don't have any walls or don't have the little space heater that I have, or don't have the socks or the warm sweater that I have? And then I'm reminded that gratitude makes me feel better. And so if we can practice gratitude, that's great. If we can practice generosity, compassion, that's great. If we can practice empathy, where even if our life is pretty good, even if we have family, even if we have partnership, I am so blessed. I have two beautiful sisters with kids that live nearby. I have a husband that loves me, and I have a home, a house, and I have you to talk to, and a lot of other people to talk to. I mean, what a great arrangement. So when I think about what I have, I feel better. And I'm not suggesting that that is a quick fix, and not everyone has. And not everyone has the privilege that I have to think about all the things that they have. So what else can we do? Well, what I know helps me. And this helped me a lot because I haven't always had so much like I do right now. That making something even out of very little, but creating something from imagination, from love, from heart, giving something to someone else, all those kinds of things made me feel better. So, connection, attachment, I always say, is the way to go. Being connected to someone, even if it's someone we don't know. Like, I don't really know you personally yet, but I feel a connection with you, and I can't see you, but I know you're there. And that is something that I've learned in the course of recovery from neglect and trauma. So I wanted to once again remind you of this very mysterious recurring event of the anniversary reaction, so you won't feel so crazy and confused and not knowing what's going on with you. Why do I feel so activated, so overstimulated, so hyper aroused, or so spaced out, or so much like crawling into my shell, or whatever our trauma default is? That maybe you're being visited by this cyclic history. And every year, certainly by knowing, recognizing, doing another piece of trauma processing, it gets better for the next cycle. And I don't get activated before my birthday anymore after all these long years. What a blessing that I can actually enjoy the privilege of getting older without having these experiences of misery, remembering what I hate to remember, but actually feeling the pleasure and the privilege that I'm still here and I have a choice about so many things, not everything, but so much more than I ever did before. So the cigarette girl, and I say girl in quotes because this is an old story, and she was a young woman by the time that the story unfolded. She had the opportunity to work through her trauma, and she stopped running the streets and being activated and going to the hospital, thanks to the brilliance and the ingenuity and the foresight and the study, the research of this young doctor who added to our armamentarium of information and knowledge about anniversary reactions, which I learned about perhaps 40 years ago, and it lodged in my brain so I can tell you about it and remind you that you're not crazy and it will pass. And in this country, it's winter. Where you are, it might be summer if you're in the southern hemisphere. And whatever it is, the world keeps turning. Even with climate change, it keeps turning. Time passes. It will pass. When I was thinking about a song today, because I like to put a song with my videos, and I always have a song playing that is part of how my brain works. And I had a partial memory of a song that I always loved, where I just remembered the refrain or a piece of the refrain where it goes, fuego, 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 and that means fire in Spanish. And it was a Puerto Rican song by one of my favorite Puerto Rican singers, Roy Brown, which is an odd name for Puerto Rican man, but so be it. That's his name. Anyway, it's an old song, and I looked up fuego, fuego, fuego because that sort of reminds me of what the young cigarette woman was yelling as she went down the street. And I found the song, and it wasn't really a song about fire. It was a song about imperialism, but it's a great song, and the part about the fire comes at the end of the song in the fuego, 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 which is that terrible trauma feeling about fire is at the end of the song, but still it seems like it really fits in these troubled times and in these times when, certainly from my point of view, this fervor around these holidays, certainly in the global north, feels like it's got a strong tone of imperialism embedded in the consumerism. So I leave you with that song and the story, and that the world keeps turning. And however you observe this season, I wish you well. And keep warm if you're in a cold climate, and be comfortable if you're in a warm or hot climate, and wherever you are. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.